They insisted it was peace. Earth saw it as slaughter. The sky over Seoul turned silver that Tuesday morning. Daeho stood on the observation deck of the Horizon 7 space station, watching the massive alien ships settle into Earth's atmosphere like clouds that refused to move. They were beautiful in a terrible way, all smooth curves and glowing lights that pulsed with colors humans had no names for. "Captain, they're broadcasting again," Heejin said from her station. She was young for a lieutenant, but sharp. Daeho trusted her instincts more than he trusted the politicians back on Earth. The voice that filled the bridge spoke perfect Korean, perfect English, perfect everything. "People of Earth, we are the Valorian Empire. We come in peace to welcome you into the Galactic Concordat. No longer must you struggle alone in the darkness. Join us and know prosperity beyond your dreams." Daeho watched the screens showing cities below. People poured into the streets, pointing at the sky. Some cheered, some prayed, some ran. He understood all three reactions. "Sir, I'm reading strange energy patterns from their ships," Heejin said quietly, her fingers dancing across her console. "It's like nothing in our database. The signature is, I don't know how to describe it. Wrong, somehow." "Log it and send it to command," Daeho ordered. He knew command wouldn't listen. They were too busy preparing the welcome ceremony. On Earth, Dr. Ji-won adjusted her lab coat and tried to calm her racing heart. The Valorians had requested Earth's best scientist for a cultural exchange. She was a xenobiologist, which made her suddenly very important. The alien delegation would arrive at her lab within the hour. She had prepared for this her entire career. Humanity's first contact with alien life. It should have been the greatest day of her life. Instead, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The Valorians who entered her lab were tall and graceful, their skin a pale blue that seemed to shimmer. They had large eyes, delicate features, and smiles that showed just a few too many teeth. Ambassador Velmoth led them, his robes flowing like water. "Dr. Ji-won, what an honor," Velmoth said, his voice warm and welcoming. "We are so pleased to meet Earth's brilliant minds. You have so much potential, so much to learn from us." Ji-won ran every test she could think of. Blood samples, neural scans, tissue analysis. The Valorians cooperated cheerfully, answering every question with patience. They seemed genuinely kind. But when Ji-won ran the neural response tests, something made her stomach turn. She showed the Valorians images designed to trigger empathy responses. A crying child, an injured animal, scenes of suffering. The human brain lit up with activity at such images. The Valorian brain showed nothing. Absolutely nothing. She ran the test 3 more times. The results were the same. The Valorians felt no empathy for pain that wasn't their own. "Fascinating results," Velmoth said, looking at the scans. "Yes, we evolved past such primitive emotional responses. Empathy is inefficient, Doctor. It clouds judgment. We have achieved true, logical clarity." Ji-won smiled and nodded and felt cold down to her bones. That night, she compiled her findings into a report and sent it to every government agency she could think of. The response came within hours. Her security clearance was suspended. The report was classified. Someone from the State Department called to remind her that Earth's relationship with the Valorians was delicate, critical, essential for humanity's future. They told her to keep her concerns to herself. In Busan, Sang-ho wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at the construction site. The Valorians wanted to build what they called integration centers in every major city. They said these would be schools where humans could learn about galactic culture and technology. The building going up near the harbor didn't look like a school. It looked like a prison. "Brother, you worry too much," Nari said, bringing him water. His sister worked in the planning department and had seen the blueprints. "It's just a cultural center. The Valorians are helping us. This is good for Busan, good for Korea, good for Earth." Sang-ho wanted to believe her. The Valorians had brought medicine that cured diseases, technology that could solve the energy crisis, promises of prosperity. World leaders couldn't sign the treaty fast enough. But he remembered his grandfather's stories about occupations and collaborations. about smiling invaders who called themselves liberators. Those stories never ended well. The treaty ceremony happened in Geneva, broadcast to every screen on Earth. Daeho watched from Horizon 7 as world leaders lined up to shake hands with Ambassador Velmoth. The document was beautiful, full of words like cooperation and mutual benefit and eternal friendship. Humanity welcomes the dawn of a new age, the Secretary General said, his voice breaking with emotion. We are no longer alone in the universe. We have found friends among the stars. The crowd erupted in cheers. Fireworks painted the sky. Children waved flags, showing Earth and Valorian symbols intertwined. Heejin stood beside Daeho, her face troubled. Sir, those energy signatures, they're getting stronger. I think we should… I know, Daeho interrupted quietly. I know. That night, Jiwon sat in her apartment, watching the celebrations on TV. Her reports had been buried, her warnings ignored. She had one copy of her research left, hidden in an encrypted drive she wore around her neck. The news showed Valorian ships settling into permanent positions above major cities. For our protection, the announcers said. For our benefit. The Valorians promised to share technology, to guide humanity into a bright future, to show them the ways of galactic civilization. On screen, Velmoth gave an interview. His smile was gentle, his words soothing. We only want what's best for humanity. Trust us. We have done this many times before, with many species. We know the path to peace. Something about the way he said peace made Jiwon's blood run cold. In Busan, Sang-ho stood outside the half-finished integration center. Security lights illuminated the construction site. He could see the heavy doors, the reinforced walls, the guard towers disguised as communication arrays. Nari joined him, no longer smiling. She had seen something in the restricted files at work, something she wasn't supposed to see. Brother, she whispered, the capacity numbers for these centers. They don't match the population they're supposed to serve. They're too high. Way too high. How high? Sang-ho asked. High enough for the entire city, Nari said. Every man, woman, and child in Busan could fit inside. Why would a school need to hold everyone? They stood there in the darkness, watching the Valorian workers direct the construction with perfect efficiency. Above them, the silver ships filled the sky, beautiful and terrible and utterly still. The Age of Peace had begun. Humanity celebrated, unaware that the Valorians had a very different definition of peace than humans did. A definition that involved processing centers, harvest quotas, and the systematic extraction of resources from species they considered primitive. Earth had signed the treaty. The chains were already being forged. And the Valorians smiled their too wide smiles, genuinely believing they were doing humanity a favor. They insisted it was peace. Earth saw it as slaughter. 6 months after the treaty, the disappearances started small. A neighborhood in Mumbai went silent overnight. A village in Brazil found empty at dawn. The Valorians had explanations for everything. Voluntary relocation, they called it. Your people have chosen to start new lives on beautiful worlds across the galaxy. Paradise awaits those who embrace the future. The government broadcasts showed smiling families boarding Valorian transports, waving goodbye to Earth. The videos looked real. The people looked happy, but no one ever heard from them again. No messages, no photos from the Paradise colonies. Nothing. Daeho's brother Won-shik had gone underground 3 months ago. He was part of a resistance movement that most people thought was crazy conspiracy theorists. Then Daeho received a coded message on an old military frequency. Just coordinates in 3 words. Come see truth. The coordinates pointed to the Australian outback, far from cities and satellites. Daeho took a shuttle down without filing a flight plan, something that would get him court-martialed if anyone found out. He didn't care anymore. Won-shik met him at the rendezvous point, thinner than Daeho remembered, with eyes that had seen things no one should see. Brother, I wish I was wrong, Won-shik said. I wish this was all in my head. They crawled to the top of a ridge as the sun set. Below them, hidden in a valley, was a Valorian facility. It was huge, all smooth white walls and glowing conduits. Transport ships landed and took off in steady rotation. "Watch," Wanshik whispered, handing Daeho binoculars. Daeho watched. A transport landed. Doors opened. People walked out, hundreds of them, still in their Earth clothes. They looked confused but calm. The Valorians guided them gently into the facility through the main entrance. "Keep watching the other side," Wanshik said quietly. Daeho shifted his view to the facility's far end. His blood turned to ice. Different doors, smaller ones. And coming out were containers. Hundreds of containers loaded onto cargo ships. The labels were in Valorian script, but Wanshik had learned to read some of it. "Biological materials," Wanshik translated. "Organic compounds, neural tissue. They're not relocating people, brother. They're processing them, like cattle. Like raw materials." Daeho wanted to throw up. He wanted to scream. He wanted to storm down there with weapons and rage. Instead, he stayed frozen, watching the efficient operation below. The Valorians moved with calm purpose. No hurry, no emotion. Just workers doing their jobs. "There are dozens of these facilities," Wanshik said. "Maybe hundreds worldwide. We think they've already processed over 1 million people." "Why hasn't anyone noticed?" Daeho asked, though he knew the answer. "They control the media. The governments are compromised. Anyone who asks questions disappears to a paradise colony." Wanshik gripped his brother's shoulder. "We need proof, real evidence. And we need people in positions of power who will listen." Far away in Seoul, Ji-won had her own problems. The Valorians wanted her expertise for a new project. They brought her to a clean white laboratory and showed her genetic sequences that made her heart sink. "We need your help developing a more efficient extraction method," her Valorian supervisor said, pleasantly. "The current process damages too much of the neural tissue. We believe human scientists might have insights we lack." They wanted her to help them kill people more efficiently. "What are you extracting this from?" Ji-won asked, though she knew. "Volunteer donors from the relocation program," the Valorian said smoothly. "They give their biological materials to advance galactic science. It's quite noble." Ji-won smiled. She nodded. She pretended to take notes. And that night, she deleted every trace of her work from the Valorian systems and ran. She had one contact left. Someone she hoped hadn't been compromised. Lieutenant Hee-jin from the Horizon 7. They met in an abandoned subway station, lit only by emergency lights. Ji-won brought her research. Hee-jin brought files she'd been compiling for months. "I've been tracking ship movements," Hee-jin said, spreading out printouts on an old bench. "The Valorians are shipping massive amounts of biological materials off-world. The weights match human body mass. The quantities match the missing population numbers exactly. It's not just murder," Ji-won said, her voice hollow. "They're farming us. I've studied their psychology. They genuinely don't see this as wrong. In Valorian culture, using lesser species for resources is normal. It's efficient. It's logical. They think they're being kind by making it painless." "They call it peace," Hee-jin said bitterly. "Ending conflict through complete assimilation." They stared at each other in the flickering light. Two women with evidence that would either save humanity or get them killed. In Busan, the integration centers had opened. The Valorians encouraged people to visit for education, for medical treatment, for job training. Most people who went in didn't come back out. The ones who did acted strange, quiet, compliant. Sang-ho had stopped working construction. He and Nari had joined a local resistance cell. There were maybe 30 of them, armed with old hunting rifles and homemade explosives. Against Valorian technology, they might as well have been throwing rocks. "We hit their transport tonight," the cell leader said. His name was Tae Yang, a former soldier. "We need to see what they're shipping." The ambush went wrong from the start. Valorian security forces appeared within minutes, their weapons making sounds like tearing metal. Half the cell died before they could retreat. But Sang-ho managed to crack open one container before fleeing. Inside were human organs, frozen and labeled. Thousands of them, packed efficiently, ready for shipment. Nari found him vomiting in an alley hours later. We can't fight them, Sangho gasped. We're insects to them. Then we fight like insects, Nari said, her voice hard. We sting, we bite, we make them regret coming here. The Valorian broadcast continued daily. Ambassador Velmoth appeared on every screen, his voice soothing and kind. Some humans resist peace. This saddens us. Resistance only prolongs suffering. We have processed thousands of species across the galaxy. We know what is best. Trust us. Accept transcendence. Why cling to your primitive existence when we offer you something greater? He genuinely believed every word. That was the worst part. The Valorians weren't evil in their own eyes. They were benevolent. They were educators, lifting up primitive species by incorporating them into something larger. The fact that this incorporation involved grinding humans into biological paste was just an unfortunate necessity. Daeho made his way back to Horizon 7 with a copy of Wanshik's evidence. He sent encrypted files to Hyejin, to Jiwon, to every resistance cell he could contact. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity was being harvested, and the governments knew. They were complicit, promised positions of power in the new order, convinced that cooperation was survival. What do we do, Captain? Hyejin asked when he returned to the station. Daeho looked at Earth below, beautiful and blue and dying. He thought of his brother in the outback, of Jiwon risking everything for truth, of Sangho and Nari fighting with nothing but courage. We prepare for war, Daeho said quietly, and we make sure every human knows the truth. The galaxy had seen peace. Now it would see what happened when you tried to peacefully slaughter humanity. They insisted it was peace. Earth saw it as slaughter. Daeho stood alone in the command center of Horizon 7, his hands resting on the controls of Earth's orbital defense grid. The grid was designed to protect Earth from asteroids and hostile forces. It had never been designed to be used against the very aliens it was built after meeting. But that was before Daeho knew the truth. His crew had evacuated. Hyejin argued with him until the very end, but he ordered her off the station. What he was about to do would be seen as treason by Earth's governments. It would mean his death, but it would also mean that humanity had a chance. "Forgive me," he whispered to no one. Then he activated the targeting systems. The Valorian capital ships hung in orbit, massive and confident. They had no shields raised. Why would they? Earth was their ally, their friend, their willing participant in the Great Harvest. Daeho targeted the 3 largest ships and fired everything the grid had. Plasma beams carved through space in brilliant lines of light. The first Valorian ship exploded in a flash that lit up the night side of Earth. The second took damage to its core, spinning out of control. The third raised shields just in time. But the impact drove it away from Earth orbit. Then the Valorian response came. It was swift and merciless. Daeho had 5 minutes to live, maybe less. He used them well. He activated every emergency broadcast system on Horizon 7 and sent a message to Earth that couldn't be blocked or stopped. People of Earth, my name is Captain Daeho. What I'm about to show you is the truth our governments have hidden. The Valorians are not our friends. They are not relocating us to paradise. They are killing us, processing us like animals, harvesting us for biological materials. I have proof. Watch, learn, and fight. The files flooded every screen on Earth. Satellite feeds, internet, television, phones. Footage from the Australian facility. Chemical analysis from Jiwon. Ship manifests from Hyejin. Testimony from Wanshik. The bodies. The containers. The truth. Valorian weapons tore through Horizon 7's hull. Daeho felt the station shake apart around him. His last thought was that he hoped it was enough. It was. The world erupted in rage. In Seoul, people poured into the streets by the millions. They surrounded the integration centers, the Valorian embassies, every alien facility they could find. The Valorian guards tried to use their stunning weapons to disperse the crowds, but there were too many humans. For every person who fell, 10 more took their place. Jiwon and Hyejin watched from a safe house as their broadcast changed everything. Governments fell within hours. Leaders who had cooperated with the Valorians were dragged from their offices. The United Nations dissolved in chaos. Earth had no unified command anymore, just millions of angry humans who finally knew they were being slaughtered. "We need weapons," Hee-jin said. "Real weapons. The Valorians will retaliate." "Wan Shik is on that," Ji-won replied, checking her encrypted messages. "He's raiding a Valorian armory in Seoul right now." Wan Shik moved through the Valorian facility with 30 fighters behind him. The alien guards were trained and disciplined, but they had never faced humans who fought with pure desperation. The resistance lost 15 people taking the armory, but they took it. Inside, Wan Shik studied the Valorian weapons, trying to understand how they worked. That's when he noticed something strange. Every time one of his fighters got close to the weapon systems, the targeting computers glitched. At first, he thought it was damage from the fight. Then he realized it was happening consistently near certain people. He called over a fighter named Bo-ra, a young woman who had lost her entire family to a relocation. "Stand next to this terminal," he said. She did. The screen flickered and went dark. "Move away." She stepped back. The screen came back online. Wan Shik tested it with 5 more people. 3 of them caused the same disruption. His mind raced through possibilities. "Everyone who causes glitches, tell me how you're feeling right now." "Angry," Bo-ra said immediately. "Angry enough to kill." "Scared," another fighter said. "Terrified, but trying not to show it." Wan Shik understood. Human emotions generated neural patterns. Strong emotions generated strong patterns. And somehow, those patterns interfered with Valorian technology. He immediately sent a message to everyone he could reach. Human brainwaves disrupt Valorian systems. Anger and fear work best. The more emotional you are, the more you interfere with their tech. We can weaponize this. Nari received the message in Busan, where her cell had taken over an old factory. They had been trying to figure out how to fight back with primitive weapons. Now they had something better. "Can we amplify it?" she asked Sang-ho, who had some electrical engineering training. "Maybe," her brother said, already sketching designs. "If we take their power cells and reverse the polarity, connect them to a neural scanner. It's crazy, but it might work." They built the first prototype in 6 hours. It was ugly, cobbled together from stolen Valorian parts and old Earth electronics. They called it a neural disruptor. When activated near a human feeling strong emotions, it broadcast those neural patterns in a wide radius. They tested it on a captured Valorian patrol vehicle. The moment they turned it on, with Bo-ra thinking about her dead children, the vehicle's systems crashed completely. "It works," Nari breathed. "We can actually fight them." The Valorians responded to the global uprising with what they called pacification protocols. Ships descended on major cities and began bombardment from orbit. They targeted government centers, military bases, and population centers with cold efficiency. Seoul burned. Tokyo burned. New York, London, Moscow, Delhi, all burning. Ambassador Velmoth broadcast one final offer. His face appeared on every surviving screen, still calm, still convinced of his righteousness. "Humans, please, stop this violence. We only want what is best for you. Your species is primitive, emotional, chaotic. You are killing yourselves with your resistance. Accept our peace. Accept transcendence. We have processed thousands of species across the galaxy. We know the path. Trust us. Why do you fight paradise?" The response came from a million sources at once. Resistance fighters, civilians, soldiers, scientists, everyone who had lost someone to the Valorian peace. "We'd rather die free than live in your paradise." Hee-jin took command of what was left of the Earth Defense Force. Most of the military had been destroyed in the initial bombardment, but there were survivors. Hidden bases, secret facilities, old ships, and older weapons. "We can't beat them in a straight fight," she told her officers, "but Wan Shik has given us an edge. Every human is a potential weapon against their technology. We use that. We get close. We make them regret coming here." Ji-won worked day and night on a terrible idea. If human neural patterns disrupted Valorian technology, what if she could amplify those patterns? Create something that would spread from human to human, turning every person on Earth into a walking disruption field? It would work, but the cost would be enormous. Humans would be incompatible with most advanced technology for generations, maybe forever. They would have to rebuild everything from scratch. She brought the proposal to Heejin and Wan Shik in a bunker beneath the ruins of Seoul. "It's our only chance," Ji-won said quietly. "But it means giving up any hope of joining galactic civilization. We'd be alone." "We're already alone," Wan Shik said. "The galaxy sees us as resources. I say we show them what happens when resources fight back." Hyejin looked at the data, understanding the implications. "If we do this, there's no going back. Humanity will be changed forever." "We're already changed," Wan Shik replied. "They saw us as sheep. Let's show them wolves." The decision was made. Ji-won began development of the neural virus. Heejin coordinated resistance cells worldwide. Wan Shik and Neri ramped up production of neural disruptors. And Sang-ho, sitting in his factory in Busan, looked at the first combat drone rolling off his improvised assembly line and smiled grimly. It was loaded with infected blood samples, ready to fly into the heart of the Valorian fleet. Above Earth, the Valorian ships prepared for final pacification. They would burn the surface if necessary. Better to destroy the resources than let them resist. They had no idea what was coming. They insisted it was peace. Earth saw it as slaughter. The escape pod crashed in the Korean mountains 3 days after Horizon 7 was destroyed. Sang-ho's resistance cell found it buried in snow, half-melted metal still smoking. They pulled Dae-ho from the wreckage more dead than alive. Nari worked on him for 2 days straight, using stolen Valorian medical supplies. When Dae-ho finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was his brother Wan Shik's face. "You crazy bastard," Wan Shik said, but he was smiling. "You started a war." "Good," Dae-ho rasped. "How bad is it?" "Bad. They're burning cities from orbit, millions dead, but people are fighting back everywhere. Your broadcast worked. The whole world knows the truth now." Dae-ho tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "What's our status?" "Come see for yourself when you can walk," Wan Shik said. "We have something that might actually work." It took Dae-ho 3 more days to recover enough to move. When he could finally walk, Wan Shik brought him to what used to be a car factory in Busan. Now it was something else entirely. Inside, hundreds of people worked around the clock. They were building neural disruptors by the thousands, cobbling them together from Valorian scrap and Earth technology. Sang-ho oversaw the operation, his hands black with grease, his eyes burning with purpose. "We can disrupt their tech," Sang-ho explained, showing Dae-ho the devices. "But it's short-range and temporary. We need something bigger." "We have something bigger," Ji-won said, emerging from a makeshift laboratory. She looked exhausted but determined. "I finished the virus." She explained it to them in simple terms. The neural amplification virus would spread through human contact, completely harmless to people but devastating to Valorian systems. It would make every human brain emit patterns that scrambled alien technology. The effect would be permanent. "What's the catch?" Dae-ho asked, because there was always a catch. "We'll never be able to use most advanced technology," Ji-won said quietly. "Anything based on Valorian science or similar neural processing systems will be incompatible with us. We'll have to develop our own technology from scratch. It could set us back centuries. Or force us to innovate in ways we never imagined," Heejin said, entering the factory. She had walked from a hidden military base 15 kilometers away. "The question is, do we want to survive as a galactic resource or live free on our own terms?" They all knew the answer. The plan came together over the next week. Heejin would coordinate a global uprising, timed perfectly. Every resistance cell, every hidden military unit, every civilian with a weapon would attack Valorian positions simultaneously. The goal was chaos, overwhelming force from unexpected directions. Wan Shik and Nari would lead the assault on the Valorian command center in Seoul. It was the heart of their Earth operations. Taking it would blind them. Ji-won would release the virus at strategic points around the globe, ensuring maximum spread. And Sang-ho would deliver the killing blow to the Valorian flagship in orbit. I'll pilot the drone myself, Sang-ho said when they protested. Someone needs to make sure it reaches the target. It's a suicide mission, Nari said, her voice breaking. So was everything Daeho did, Sang-ho replied. So is what Wan Shik is planning. So is all of this. We're fighting for survival. There's no such thing as a safe option anymore. Daeho wanted to argue, but he understood. He had made the same choice on Horizon 7. The day of the uprising dawned cold and clear. Around the world, humans prepared for what might be their last fight. In Mumbai, Delhi, Lagos, Sao Paulo, Jakarta, Moscow, every city that still stood, people armed themselves with whatever they had. The Valorians had better weapons, better armor, better everything, except they didn't have desperation. They didn't have the rage of a species fighting for its existence. Ji-won stood in Seoul's central medical facility, now a resistant stronghold. She held the viral samples in her hands, each one containing humanity's future. She thought about her career, studying alien life, dreaming of the stars. This wasn't how she imagined first contact would go. She released the first sample into the ventilation system. Within hours, it would spread across the city. Within days, across the peninsula. Within weeks, across the world. There was no going back now. Wan Shik led 300 fighters through Seoul's ruins toward the Valorian command center. The building rose from the ashes like a silver tower, still pristine while everything around it burned. Valorian guards stood ready, their weapons humming with power. Nari carried a neural disruptor on her back, the largest one they had built. For mother and father, she whispered, thinking of the family she lost to the integration centers. The attack began with explosions. The resistance had learned to make bombs from Valorian power cells. They weren't elegant, but they were loud and destructive. The explosions drew the guards away from the main entrance. Wan Shik's team went in through the sewers. The fighting inside was brutal and close. Valorian weapons worked fine at range, but the neural disruptors made them glitch up close. The battle came down to knives, clubs, bare hands. Humans died by the dozens, but they kept coming. For every person who fell, 2 more pushed forward. Nari activated the large disruptor in the building's central chamber. Every Valorian system in a kilometer radius crashed. The lights went out. The security systems died. The communication arrays went silent. The command center fell. High above in his factory-turned-missile silo, Sang-ho prepared for launch. The combat drone was ugly but functional, loaded with viral samples and enough explosives to breach a capital ship's hull. He had programmed the navigation, but he was going along to make sure it worked. "Tell my sister I love her," he said to the technicians helping him. "Tell her yourself when you get back," one of them said. Sang-ho smiled. They both knew he wasn't coming back. The drone launched, burning hard for orbit. Valorian point defense systems opened fire, but the drone was small and fast and piloted by someone who had nothing to lose. Sang-ho dodged fire that should have been impossible to dodge, pushed the drone past safety limits, and aimed for the flagship's hangar bay. The Valorians saw him coming. They tried to close the bay doors. They were too slow. Sang-ho crashed through the hangar entrance, the drone screaming as it tore through Valorian fighters and equipment. He set off the explosives just as he reached the interior bulkhead, breaching through to the ship's main corridor. The viral samples released, contaminating the air systems. Sang-ho stumbled from the wreckage, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Valorian security forces surrounded him, weapons aimed. "This is Earth," he said into the drone's still active communicator. "We are not your resources. We are not your peace. We are free, and we will remain free." Then he triggered the second set of explosives, the ones he was wearing. The blast tore through the flagship's core systems. The virus spread through the air, infecting every human crew member the Valorians had captured and put to work. Those humans became walking disruption fields, scrambling systems throughout the massive ship. On Earth, Heejin watched the flagship's lights begin to flicker and die. Around the world, the same thing was happening to every Valorian vessel. The virus had reached critical mass. Every human on Earth was now incompatible with Valorian technology. The alien ships began to fall from the sky, not in explosions but in slow, helpless descents. Their weapons wouldn't fire. Their engines wouldn't respond. Their communications were static. Deho stood in the ruined streets of Seoul, watching a Valorian cruiser drift down like a falling leaf. It crashed into the harbor with a sound like the end of the world. All across Earth, Valorian ships fell. Their ground forces found their equipment useless. Their perfect, logical warfare met human chaos and crumbled. Ambassador Velmoth broadcast one final message from his dying flagship. "We don't understand. We offered you peace. We offered you transcendence. Why do you choose this? Why do you choose death over perfection?" No one answered him. There was nothing left to say. The Valorian Empire retreated, their fleet in ruins, their understanding of the galaxy shattered. They left Earth behind, broadcasting warnings to any species who would listen. Humans are dangerous. Humans are irrational. Stay away from Earth. The galaxy listened. They insisted it was peace. Earth saw it as slaughter. The war ended not with a bang, but with silence. The Valorian ships that could still fly limped away from Earth's orbit, broadcasting warnings across every frequency. The ones that couldn't fly were left to drift, dead metal shells floating in space. Deho stood in what used to be Seoul's central plaza. The city was rubble. Fires still burned in places that had been burning for weeks. The sky was clear of alien ships for the first time in 8 months, but the cost of that empty sky was visible in every direction. Bodies lined the streets. Human and Valorian both, though the human dead outnumbered the aliens 100 to 1. The Valorians had been efficient even in retreat, killing as many as they could before their systems failed completely. Heejin found him there, standing among the ruins. She looked older than she had a year ago. They all did. "Final count is in," she said quietly. 40% of Earth's population, gone. 4 billion people, dead or processed or simply vanished in the chaos. Deho felt the weight of that number like physical pressure on his chest. "We won," he said, but it didn't feel like victory. "We survived," Heejin corrected. "That's different." Ji-won emerged from her laboratory 3 days after the last Valorian ship disappeared. She had been running tests, trying to understand what they had done to themselves. The neural virus had worked exactly as designed. Every human on Earth now carried it. Every human would carry it forever. She gathered the survivors of the resistance in an old university building that had somehow remained standing. Deho was there. Hyejin, Won Shik, Nari, and thousands of others who had fought and bled for Earth's freedom. "We're changed," Ji-won explained, showing them brain scans. "The virus is permanent. Our neural patterns will always disrupt Valorian technology and anything similar. Most galactic technology uses similar neural processing principles. We can't use it. We can't interface with it. We're incompatible with galactic civilization." "So we're alone," someone said from the crowd. "We were always alone," Won Shik replied. "The galaxy saw us as cattle. At least now we're free cattle." The rebuilding began slowly. Earth had lost most of its infrastructure, its governments, its way of life. What remained was fragmented, scattered, held together only by the shared trauma of survival. Ji-won established the Institute of Human Sciences in what was left of Seoul. Its mission was simple: develop technology that worked with humanity's changed neural patterns, not against them. Progress was slow. They couldn't use Valorian templates or galactic databases. Everything had to be built from scratch, tested, refined. But humans were good at building from scratch. Heejin took command of the reformed Earth Defense Force. It wasn't much at first, just scattered military units and civilian militias. But she built it into something real. The REDF operated on a simple principle that Heejin made crystal clear: Earth would never be caught unprepared again. "We don't negotiate with species who see us as resources," she told her officers. "We don't trust promises of peace from those who tried to harvest us. We defend Earth with overwhelming force, and we never, ever forget what almost happened." The REDF built ships from salvaged Valorian hulls, retrofitted with human-compatible systems. They were ugly compared to the sleek alien vessels, but they worked. More importantly, they were armed. Heavily armed. Wanshik and Nari focused on rebuilding Korea. The peninsula had been devastated, but its people were stubborn. They cleared rubble. They planted crops in contaminated soil and found ways to make it grow. They built monuments to the dead, great walls covered in names. Nari insisted the monuments include everyone. Not just the heroes, not just the fighters, but every person who was taken to the integration centers. Every person who disappeared. Every name they could recover from the Valorian processing records. "We don't forget," she said. "We never forget. This is the price of their peace." The monuments grew across the world. In every city, every town, every place that had lost people to the Valorian harvest. Walls of names, millions upon millions of names. Sang Ho's name was on the monument in Busan, placed at the very top. "Hero of Earth," it said. The man who delivered humanity's final blow. His factory was converted into a shipyard. The reformed Earth Defense Force commissioned it to build warships. And it did. The production line that once made civilian drones now produced military vessels, each one carrying weapons designed by humans for humans. Daeho took a position that didn't officially exist. Earth's governments called him an ambassador, but his job had nothing to do with diplomacy. He traveled to the edge of the solar system in retrofitted scout ships, meeting the few alien vessels that dared approach Earth. His message was always the same. "Leave us alone." Some aliens tried to argue. They claimed the Valorians were an anomaly, that not all species saw humans as resources. Daeho listened politely and then repeated himself. "Leave us alone, or discover what happens when you push humanity too far." Most aliens left. The ones who didn't face the full might of the REDF. The galaxy learned quickly. Earth was off limits. 5 years after the war, Jiwon made a breakthrough. She developed the first truly human-compatible quantum computer, built on principles completely different from galactic technology. It was slower, bulkier, less efficient. But it was theirs. 10 years after the war, the first human-built colony ship left Earth orbit. It was headed for Mars, carrying 10,000 people ready to start fresh on a dead world. They couldn't terraform it with galactic technology, so they would do it the hard way. The human way. 20 years after the war, Earth had recovered enough to function. Cities were rebuilt, though they looked different now. More practical, less elegant. Technology advanced in strange directions, diverging from the galactic standard. Humans developed their own methods, their own science, their own path. 50 years after the war, news reached Earth from across the galaxy. The Valorian Empire had collapsed. The species they had been processing, inspired by Earth's example, had risen in rebellion. The empire that had stood for 10,000 years fell in less than a century. Other species reached out to Earth cautiously, not to integrate them, not to offer them peace, but to learn, to understand how a primitive species had defeated a galactic power. Daeho, now old and gray, met with some of these ambassadors. He was polite but firm. "You can trade with us, you can talk with us, but you will never control us. We learned our lesson about galactic peace." Hyejin, leading the REDF from her flagship, made sure those words had teeth. Earth's fleet had grown into something formidable. Not the largest in the galaxy, but widely considered the most dangerous. The REDF didn't fight fair. They didn't follow galactic conventions of warfare. They fought like humans, with creativity and desperation and absolute commitment. The galaxy learned to respect that. Jiwon's institute became the center of human scientific advancement. Students came from all over Earth to study there, learning to think differently, to build differently. They couldn't copy galactic technology, so they innovated. Sometimes they failed. Sometimes they succeeded in ways that surprised everyone. Wanshik and Nari grew old in the rebuilt city of Busan. They never forgot what happened. They taught the next generation about the war, about the cost of trusting those who called themselves peaceful while sharpening their knives. Peace isn't something others give you, Nari told the children who came to hear her stories. Peace is something you defend, with blood if necessary, with sacrifice always. Never trust someone who offers you paradise. Paradise doesn't need to be offered. It needs to be built. The monuments remained, growing larger as more names were recovered from Valorian records. 4 billion people. The number never got smaller, never faded, never was forgotten. On the 50th anniversary of the war's end, Daeho stood at the monument in Seoul. He was nearly 80 now, his body failing, but his mind still sharp. Hyejin stood beside him, Jiwon on his other side. They were the last of the original resistance leadership still alive. Was it worth it? Jiwon asked quietly. Everything we lost, everything we gave up. Was freedom worth this price? Daeho looked at the wall of names. 4 billion dead, a changed humanity, isolation from the galaxy, technology set back generations. The cost had been almost too much to bear. Then he looked at the children playing in the rebuilt plaza. Free children. Human children who would never be harvested, never be processed, never be told that their slaughter was peace. Yes, he said simply. It was worth it. Earth remained isolated by choice. The galaxy moved on, other species rising and falling, empires forming and crumbling. But Earth endured, stubbornly human, fiercely independent, forever vigilant. And in the halls of power across 1,000 worlds, leaders remembered the lesson Earth taught them. They remembered the species that chose extinction over submission. They remembered what happened when you tried to harvest humanity. The stars belonged to no one. But humanity made certain they belonged to themselves. In the end, the Valorians had been right about one thing. They had offered peace. True peace, from their perspective. The peace of assimilation, of resources efficiently used, of primitives elevated through incorporation into something greater. They just never understood that humanity had a different definition of peace. One that involved freedom, choice, and the right to exist on their own terms. The galaxy called it stubbornness. Humanity called it survival. And they made sure everyone knew the difference.